where he's buried. You know, the world is spending far too much money on militarism around the planet, and by putting the Nonagon physically on top of the Pentagon, it's a low building, there's plenty of room for another 5-story building on top, with beautiful architectural design, glass, a tree garden at the top, peace garden, fountains. Inside you'd have conference rooms, you'd have like cinema type places for peace films, you'd have studios that could make peace films. It would house the US Department of Peace, which loads of people are calling for. Well, this is physically where it should be, on top of the Pentagon, as if to say to the military, your time's up, you've screwed the world up, you've cost us X trillion dollars, sorry, peace people are here now. And the budget of the Nonagon would be equal to the Pentagon. However much the Pentagon gets, Nonagon will get. And I bet you, within a few decades, we'd get world peace. Their mission would be to help mediate religious conflicts, to help run mediation services in all schools in the US, to stop racial violence through educating police and showing them films about the old lynching days of the dark South, explaining about slavery, education, education, education for peace. The Nonagon would be able to do that, and not just in the US. I mean, I would argue they should set up 3 peace studies departments in 3 universities in every country in the world. Fund it from the Nonagon, because peace is known about, because of Martin Luther King, because of Gandhi, because of Thomas Merton, because of the great thinkers about peace throughout all history. Mahavira, Buddha, Jesus, you name it, Muhammad in his own way. We know what peace is. What we have to work out is how to deliver it. There's a delivery shortage. And that can be done through education. That's schools, colleges, universities, seminaries, training courses, and so on. They're the frontline firefighters of this plague of violence that's going on. And it should be done in a way that's sensitive to the culture. So in Islamic states, Pakistan, Afghanistan, peace education would be an Islamic type of peace education. You'd find all the great quotes and commentaries on the Quran and in the Hadith about peace and forgiveness and reconciliation. It's the core message of Islam, as I'm explaining in my own commentary on the Quran, which has taken me 10 years, But the Nonagon would have the money and the power to assemble a team of scholars from all over, every branch of Islam, Shia, Sunni, Gnostic, Ismaili, whatever, to really do a comprehensive, yes, actually Islam's supposed to be about peace, guys, sorry we got that wrong. And the same with Judaism, the same with scholars of the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, and all the books of Enoch and the Kabbalah and so on. And then with Christianity, all the branches of Christianity. Again, it's a peace religion, for God's sake. That's what Christ was teaching. Otherwise, what's the point of it? Christ wasn't saying let's go and enslave people and whip them and whip them to death, rape them, in the name of truth. I mean, that's such a perversion. That's what I call the demonic inversion of truth that happens in history, and that's what the white supremacy thing is all on. No, the white people, whatever that means, should be the servant people of humanity. We are, we're just another tribe. Through the accident of geography, our skin is paler, and as proper custodians of our sacred lands, we should be like all the other tribes, helping build the one family of humanity. And as a Druid elder, I'm happy that the Celts on the whole have done that in Ireland, and but it's touch and go, because look at Trump, he has Scottish blood. I mean, it's shocking. It has to be, these people need educating, and don't they? Right. Okay. So that's a couple of things. The Nonagon. And then I want to talk about a bit about the coronavirus. Obviously, we're all still suffering this. There's rumours of a vaccine coming. There's factions on the internet. There's the ones that say it's all fake, it's all a pandemic. That's Sacha Stone and his gang. There's others that realise, no, it's actually real, dangerous. Well, I'm a philosopher, so I suspend judgment. I think it is absolutely real. I know people who've had it. I think that the cause of it is what is not sure. And I have seen things that point to it might well be a leak from a military research program, which may well have involved American, USA, French, and Chinese researchers. There's a trail of similar types of research that seems to have led to this virus. Now, if that's true, it needs exposing. It needs. This is why it's so important to get a truth bill through Congress and through the Parliament and other assemblies, the French National Assembly, so that if asked point-blank questions, the Minister of Science says, well, actually, yes, we did do this. We did give the Chinese the expertise to make viruses like this. The French did. We helped fund and build and design and train the people that operated the Chinese Wuhan Institute, which is shocking but true. People in Lyon connected with French virology. So, it's time to put your hand up and confess, folks, because stop treating people like idiots, really. Once we get the truth, then we can work out the consequences. For me, the consequence is ban utterly and comprehensively all future biological weapons research and other weapons of mass destruction, chemical and nuclear. This should be a wake-up call to every peace activist on the planet. I don't know why more peace activists and peace thinkers aren't speaking out against the COVID thing. I think that the whole existing pandemic sort of hysteria is missing the point 99%. None of them are saying what we need is to actually find out where it came from. They're kind of right-ish on saying there seems to be some kind of conspiracy going on here. But what they're not doing is saying, let's focus on where it came from. Because that source is the source of the conspiracy. It's a conspiracy against our health and our well-being, and the 200,000 Americans who died, the 60,000 in the UK and in Britain and elsewhere. The figures are shocking, and so as a philosopher I'm just saying we need to find out the cause so that we can properly treat it. Yeah, vaccines, great, let's test them properly, make sure the science is done, that they're safe, but we also have to study the epidemiology and the etiology of this disease so that we can prevent it ever happening again. And if it was leaked from a lab, we need to know. And if it wasn't, we also need to know. I suspend judgment, but I'm not going to know. I'm not going to close this case till the UN has conducted its proper investigations under the Bioweapons Convention. I also want to I mentioned earlier, but I want to say about Brexit, I'm delighted Dominic Cummings is gone. He is the architect of Brexit. It's a fantasy dreamt up in his crazy mind. He spent years living in Russia, where I think he adopted what's called the Genghis Khan approach to politics, which is you seize power by whatever means, false, fake, violent, vicious, whatever. You seize power by whatever means, and you hold on to it as long as you possibly can. And you ignore all rules of ethics, and normal decency and all that. The man is a Genghis Khan of politics, and he deserves to go to prison for his mendacity and his contempt of Parliament. In the old Parliament, he could have been actually put in the parliamentary jail. I think they should have done it, and it was a sign of total weakness. People like Dominic Green and stuff should have realised that this man was evil and had to be stopped, and stuck him in parliamentary jail. Instead, they thought they could deal with these people like in a polite debate. No, you can't. These people follow the Genghis Khan rule of politics, and he's destroyed the Conservative Party. It's never going to recover from this Brexit, madness, and the lies that were told. Boris Johnson is not even properly British. He hasn't got a sense of fair play in his bones. He doesn't understand that the English people are actually a decent people at heart who do believe in honour, justice and truth. What Boris Johnson, he fights with the George Washington school of politics, which is you lie, you dissemble, and you hound the enemy till they surrender. You don't tell the truth, whatever happens. And that's how he and his slavers won their revolution. And then expanded across the Appalachians, which is what they wanted all along, to steal Indian lands. The British had made a deal with the Indians. We weren't going to colonise beyond the Appalachians. That's why the Americans wanted their revolution, was because they could break the deal the British had with the Indians and tear it up, and then all go galloping into the West, stealing Indian land and conducting genocide, which is what happened. I learned this by talking to an American who'd studied all this stuff in detail. Washington is not the squeaky clean guy everyone was taught. That's propaganda. He also killed a French officer in cold blood under a white flag of truce early on in his military career. He was a reprobate, actually. And the whole of that American Revolution was a propaganda project to steal Indian land, break the treaty with the British, and to keep the blacks enslaved. I mean, gosh, where's Howard Zinn and all the other historians when you need them? I don't know how many progressive historians in American history have actually gone into all this and joined the dots up. It will be interesting. One day somebody ought to. I also want to talk about the sort of spiritual news of the Mary Magdalene Studies Association. I'm still developing that, and hopefully we're going to publish an academic journal. If anyone wants to get involved, help. I've been in touch with New Black Friars, which is the journal of the Dominican order, based at the University of Oxford, and the editor, who's a philosopher of religions. The Dominicans are supposed to have Mary Magdalene as their patron saint, yet they've never properly studied her or taken her seriously. I don't know what they've been up to all these years. What did Thomas Aquinas and Meister Eckhart and all the other great Dominicans, why haven't they done a sort of Mary Magdalene studies? Anyway, we're doing it now, right? And it's the 21st century. Long overdue. I also want to acknowledge today is the day of the tragic murder of Richard Whitgift, who was the last abbot of Glastonbury. In my daily prayer practice, I do a sort of daily, review of who are the saints of the day in all religions. And this came up today, the 15th of November. Now, Richard Whitgift was the last abbot. He was a normal kind of guy. He was a Christian, not, a genius theologian or anything, just a nice guy, probably. He was moderate in his, running of the abbey. Everyone was getting on fine, no real conflicts. There were 100 monks still doing their work, praying, writing, bumbling around Glastonbury. Then King Henry VIII decided that he wanted to take over these monasteries, and he did them bit by bit. In a shocking way, really, if you actually look at the history of it all. And he first sort of wanted the smaller ones, so he got the smaller ones. And he sent Thomas Cromwell as his henchman to capture them. Now, Thomas Cromwell was a very complex chap, and there is evidence that when he was abroad in Europe, he worked as a mercenary in Italy. The true biography of Thomas Cromwell has never been properly written up. There's a bit of a cult for Cromwell in England on TV. But the real story's not been told. The story is what he was doing in Europe. He became interested in occultism. He got a copy of the Picatrix, which teaches you how to work with demons to achieve your will, including up to and including human sacrifice. The Picatrix was a kind of compilation of black magic for a would-be practicing black magician before Crowley came on the scene. Crowley loved the Picatrix, right? Now, it's very interesting, isn't it, that Thomas Cromwell had a copy and studied it and effectively was a black magician. This side of his life has never been studied. Well, surprise, surprise, right? Because the kind of historians that look at Henry VIII's parliamentary history, people like Pollard, they weren't interested in the esoteric history. It didn't exist as a discipline. But because I'm an expert in esoteric history, that's the thing I've always looked at. And I think it's shocking that this man, Thomas Cromwell, got away with what he did. He was a practicing black magician. He was, let's say, the Dominic Cummings of his day. I'm sure Dominic Cummings has also got a copy of the Picatrix or equivalents. We know that Daniel Hannan was a great Crowley fan, who was the other great ignoramus behind Brexit, right? So these people are, destructivists. That kind of black magic, what it is about chaos magic, disrupting order, truth, reason and love, and creating absolute chaos and mayhem, which is what Brexit does. It's what Trump has been doing. He's still doing it, right? These are chaos magicians, and by definition, that's what black magic does. And by the way, sorry, it's the wrong name. Black magic is actually magic from Egypt. The colour of the pupil of the eye is black. Real good, down-to-earth, organic black magic. Nothing wrong with it. It's this weird, stupid stuff that is, sort of negative occultism, whatever you want to call it. So there is Thomas Cromwell. He finally decides he wants Glastonbury Abbey. It was the biggest abbey in Britain. He sends his henchmen down. They go through all the books. They find fake stuff. And they arrest the abbot, who was by now quite an elderly man, white hair, sweet scholar type chap. They haul him to the Tower, for God's sake, the Tower of London. And there he's interviewed and tortured under the personal direction of Thomas Cromwell. And he's accused of heresy and blasphemy and treason. Now this is in spite of the fact that he's already signed a document saying he can accept Henry as the head of the church in England. That didn't, he could work that one with his conscience. I don't know what they asked him to accept after that. But anyway, there was a point at which he said, no, I can't sign any more documents. Actually, the Pope is the head of the church, universal. Henry can be head of the church in England, fine. French king's head of the church in France. But, there is a universal pontiff in Rome, descended from Linus and Peter, and direct line back to Christ. So, back off. But no, they wanted the wealth of Glastonbury Abbey, so they tortured him. And he refused to recant, so they then took him back to Glastonbury. And on this day, the 15th of November, he, along with two other senior monks in the abbey, were killed. And they were not just killed, they were hung, drawn and quartered on this day, the 15th of November. Now that's an old, sweet abbot. Now Glastonbury Abbey was a custodian of an amazing library. It had relics and things going back to the Celtic era, and it was purported to be as old as the mission of Joseph of Arimathea. What I wouldn't give to go back in time and prevent that abbey being ransacked and its manuscripts destroyed and scattered. John Dee was, very perturbed at this later on, and anyone with any sense would lament the destruction of the abbeys by Thomas Cromwell. But it wasn't just the abbeys, it was the people. And this poor monk, Abbot Richard Whiting, we honour his memory today, hung, drawn and quartered for being a moderate in matters of faith and keeping the faith that had been Britain's faith for, 1,000 years. And to me, it's symbolic of the chaos and destruction that Brexit stands for. Brexit is a Thomas Cromwell type of project. It's a Dominic Cummings project. It's a cut up the undefiled, unified body of Christ, which is Europe, in all its complexities and craziness, but everywhere. The abundance of churches here in France, the Christian tradition lives on here in all forms: Gnostic, esoteric, Catholic, Protestant, Jehovah's Witnesses, whatever. It's a free country. It has religious freedom, as does Germany, as does Denmark and Sweden and the Balkans and Greece. So what does Cromwell want to do? Well, cut this body up into quarters, and then it was exhibited on poles in towns around the southwest. Well, no, that's just stupid, that's ignorant. And so what we do in the Universal Church today, and I'm speaking as an Anglican Universal Church member, is we are shocked at this horror, the cruelty. And Parliament authorised all this. He got away with it because Parliament was rubber stamping it. So when Claire Fox gets up in Parliament and says, well, Parliament can do anything it wants because it's universally in charge of its own power, and therefore she opposed she wanted to pass this bill that breaks European and international law, which was fortunately voted down in the Lords. Claire Fox has just been made a member of the Lords, which is completely stupid. She is not a good person, not a clever person. She's a BBC creation of a fantasy intellectual. She's not a proper intellectual. She can't work out the difference between right and wrong. That's not an intellectual. That's someone clever with words. So Claire Fox gets up and says, no, Parliament should be supreme because we are Parliament. Well, hang on, I don't care which Parliament on the planet, but it is all subject to Dharma. It is all subject to cosmic law or divine law, however you want to describe that or explain it. In terms of the philosophy of law, no assembly on the planet is utterly, totally sovereign, let alone the UK English Parliament, which historically has done terrible deeds. Like for hundreds of years, it sanctioned slavery. It was only in the late 18th and then early 19th century that proper, genuine liberal politicians like Wilberforce and others managed to persuade Parliament finally to outlaw it, and it didn't happen properly until the 1830s. Well, at least it was 30 years before the States. So no, Parliament isn't the absolute sovereign over all, reality and over all morality. It is subject to law of a moral type and a moral conscience. And that's why these religions and why people like Abbot Whiting are important. That's why Christ was teaching and why Buddha was and Mahavira, because they teach this cosmic law. That's what Druids teach. That's why I love Druids, because our duty is actually to appoint the kings and to sack them if they're not sticking to Dharma. The word Druid means someone that can see the truth, see the Dharma. Okay, so Brexit, yeah, your time has come, I think, and poor old Richard Whiting and that genuinely universalist tradition that he stood for. I lament its destruction and the libraries that were closed. I wrote to Prince Charles some time ago after a pretty cosmic dream I had, asking when he becomes king, could he please rebuild all the abbeys like Glastonbury, using modern architecture intermingled with the ruins of the medieval. So you could put sort of glass and beautiful pine and wood and like greenhouse type things in amongst the ruins where people could live. They could run like hostels for people, bookshops, scriptoria, study centres, garden, and have gardens around, and they could become self-sufficient spiritual pilgrimage centres, loosely run by the Church of England and the Catholic Church, which they could co-share the lease, and then let people come and visit like in the old days, and they could have even a healing centre attached. This would give work to the unemployed kids of inner cities in Britain and teach them all kinds of craft skills, carpentry, stained glass making, all that stuff. Anyway, that's what I wrote to Charles. We'll see if he does it. He said, remind me again when I'm king, so I'm going to. I want to finish by talking about my project on religion and maths, which I'm still working on. Religious and maths book. I'm sure in the old Glastonbury library there would have been books on sacred maths and the Christian kind of, the understanding of knowledge. You see, in the medieval world, knowledge is a sacred gift to mankind. It's not a thing that we acquire, competitively. It's a sacred influx of divine knowing that comes to us from God, like and at the university level, it's a really important divine thing, knowledge actually, and the Druids knew that, the Rishis know that, the Buddhists sages know that, the Jains know that, the Muslims know that, the Sufis. Muhammad knew that. That's where he got his Quran from this divine source, right? So what I'm trying to do in my book on religion and maths is explain the mathematics of all this. Because I believe maths also comes from sacred, intuitions into the way reality is structured behind the scenes, what David Bohm calls the implicate order. And I'm trying to work out in this book on religious maths how that might work out in practice. How can we study this scientifically? And I've just written chapters on quantum theory and religious maths, on relativity theory and religious maths, and many other really interesting topics. That I published volume 1. I'm going to have volume 2 out by Christmas, so do look out for that. Make a great present for your, any intellectuals or anyone that's interested in maths or religion or both or philosophy. And I think that's, it's really exciting. I'm doing a lot inspired by Newton, because Newton is one of my intellectual heroes. I've been to Woolsthorpe Manor where he taught, where he worked, and discovered many of his discoveries about gravity and so on. And it's trying to carry on with the Principia Mathematica. He finished it he stopped when it came to the question of what causes gravity. He said, I don't know, but it might have something to do with God. Well, I'm like, my volumes start at that point. What is it, this thing that might have something to do with God that causes gravity and light and sound and etc.? And how can we work on that? I think 400 years after Newton is time that we, 300 years after Newton is time that we began to ask those questions. So that's what I'm doing. Anyway, it's really exciting. And that's where I've come across this wonderful Theodore Parker quote about the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. Well, I'm trying to work out the maths of that. How can we know if the moral arc of the universe is bending towards justice? How can we measure the angle? How can this or that or whatever events indicate that's happening? You see, I think the Biden victory indicates, yes, the arc is bending towards justice. And it was wonderful that Biden quoted that in his acceptance speech. I don't think Trump's reading the same math books. He's got a whole different, parallel universe theory where he is justice and everyone that's against him is evil. That's not, he hasn't done his sums. Dear old Trump, he just hasn't done his moral sums. I'd love to know if and where he ever studied philosophy and ethics as a kid. In the American school system, you see, they don't even teach it. It's not on the curriculum. That's wrong. I think one of the things I'd love to do for Biden is help design a curriculum for American school system to include maths, moral mathematics, but also to include religious studies and philosophy as an academic discipline, like economics or business studies or history or geography. It is simply a robust academic discipline that I think it's the right of every American school kid to learn about. It's really interesting. And poor old Trump types, they never do. They never get to learn it. And they don't learn it later in life because they learn in the University of Hard Knocks, the street, that you've got to be tough, and ruthless and trample people down. Okay, well, no, I agree with the British system. We have compulsory religious education. And I've been very happy to be a teacher in that subject, and it should be so in America. I also want to talk about the coming, at the end of the month, 30th, I'm organising the World Intellectual Forum online conference. We have this every month, 30th of the month, a variety of speakers, and people are welcome to come and listen, and you can even apply to speak. One of our, hopefully, attenders is Professor Chumakov, who's just published The Philosophy of Globalization, a book in English of his selected articles over the years. I met Chumakov way back at a Philosophers for Peace conference at the University of Sussex in 1988. So, we go back a long way, and we've met at conferences on peace issues ever since, including the launch of the World Intellectual Forum in India in 2017. So, let's bring the great thinkers and intellectuals of the world together. Let's discuss how we can escape this darkness. As I said in my song for Orpheus, we need to get out of this underworld. My recipe is through truth. And I still maintain that in any moral mathematics or religious mathematics, it's truth that matters. Because if you think about it, truth is when the sums come out right, when you get the equation worked out, when you calculate the angles and you know they all match up. That's what we're trying to do as a planet, and it's difficult. But that's the job for proper, trained, focused and inspired intellectuals. So anyway, come and join us. It's an ongoing project, and Chubukov, bless him, thanks for the book. He's been, I think, the single most important Russian intellectual writing about these issues in the last 20, 30 years. I want to also mention my friend Acharya Mahapragya, who inspired me with his Jain philosophy of Anikantavada. This book, Anikanta, the Third Eye, is one of his classics. I met him several times, and he was a great thinker because he asked the right questions. He wasn't a dogmatist who said, this is how it is, follow this. He said, this is how it may be, research this, go away and work on it, come back and report. He was a proper, genuine deep thinker, and in this book he talks about the many-sidedness of truth. So here's a little quote. To the man with right perceptions, all philosophies seem true. And to the man with warped perceptions, every philosophy seems baseless or untrue. The truth or untruth of a sastra is dependent on our vision. Sastra meaning a scripture. When the eye of Anikanta is opened, then everything seems true. Nothing is baseless. As long as we see with only the two physical eyes, things get divided into true and false. One person is loved and another not loved. One thing is acceptable and another not. But when the third eye is opened, then there are no likes or dislikes. There is only an entity. When the third eye is opened, then nothing is destroyed or created. Nothing is permanent or eternal. A third category is formed. This third eye is that of Anikanta. The Acharyas of Anikanta have said that there is nothing permanent or impermanent in the world. The eye that looks for permanence is one, and the eye that looks for impermanence is another. But the third eye is that which sees the truth. And he goes on. It's a wonderful little book, and the point of many-sidedness in Jain philosophy is that no one ideology or philosophy or theology can explain everything from all possible angles. Truth is a multi-dimensional, multifaceted diamond which sparkles the light of pure consciousness in many different directions simultaneously. And, what somebody picks up as Islam, channeled through Muhammad, 7th century Arabia, what somebody else picks up as Buddhism, channeled through Buddha, 6th century BC in northern India, or somebody picks up as Christianity from Christ's revelations and teachings in 1st century Judea, or what somebody else picks up from Moses, 15th century BC, Egypt, desert. These are all refractions of the light, or what different druids picked up in the Celtic world, or the runic masters of Scandinavia. You see, truly enlightened sages exist in all cultures and